Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto awakens the power of Egyptian mummy, Naruto x harem. Summary. Naruto Uzumaki, the human reincarnation of a forgotten Egyptian entity known as the Silent Judge. He is not merely a pharaoh. He was an arbiter of cosmic law, tasked with judging gods and monsters alike. His power is not just sand and curses, but the absolute authority over life, death, truth, and order. He retains fragmented memories of this past life, which manifest as instinct and an unshakable, ancient confidence. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The weight of stillness. The air in Kuo Academy was a tapestry of youthful energy, a vibrant blend of shouted greetings, locker doors slamming shut, and the gossiping whispers that formed the lifeblood of any high school. It was a familiar, comfortable chaos. Today, however, a new thread had been woven into that tapestry, one made of unnerving silence. It pulled the entire pattern taut, distorting the familiar shapes of the school day into something tense and watchful. The source of this distortion was a single transfer student. His name, according to the flustered homeroom teacher, was Naruto Uzumaki. The name itself was unremarkable. The young man it belonged to was anything but. He sat in the back corner of the classroom by the window, a position coveted for its view of the cherry blossoms and its potential for daydreaming. Yet, he wasn't looking out the window. His gaze, a shade of blue so deep it seemed to absorb the light, swept over the classroom with a placid, ancient stillness that did not belong on the face of a teenager. He wasn't handsome in the polished, idol-like way of the school's prince, Yuto Kiba. His blonde hair was cut short and spiky, his face held sharp, defined angles, and his skin was tanned as if he'd spent a lifetime walking under a relentless sun. 3 faint whisker-like marks adorned each cheek, curious scars that only added to his exotic, untamed aura. He wore the standard male uniform, but it looked different on him. Less like a costume he was forced into and more like a temporary, amusing disguise. It was his presence, his sheer solidity, that was causing the disruption. The usual class clowns were quiet, the gossips spoke in hushed tones, and even the teacher, a veteran of 20 years, found himself stumbling over his lesson plan whenever his eyes met the transfer students. It felt like being watched by a predator that had already decided you weren't a threat, and was now merely observing you out of mild curiosity. The rumors that had preceded him were a contradictory mess. Some said he was kicked out of his last school for crippling a whole gang. Others whispered he was the heir to some forgotten Yakuza family. A few, more imaginative girls, spun tales of him being a fallen prince from a foreign land. The truth, however, was silent, and it sat in the back of the classroom, breathing in the mundane air of Kuo Academy as if it were a fine, aged wine. When the lunch bell finally rang, the tension in the room snapped. Students scrambled out, eager to escape the suffocating calm that had enveloped them. Naruto, however, moved with a deliberate lack of hurry. He rose from his seat, his movements fluid and economical, and made his way out of the classroom. The other students parted for him instinctively, a sea of bodies creating a path without a single word being exchanged. They weren't afraid in the typical sense. They weren't expecting him to lash out. It was a more primal response, the deference small animals pay to a lion simply walking past. He found an empty bench under the shade of a large ginkgo tree, the midday sun filtering through the leaves to dapple the ground in shifting patterns of light and shadow. He didn't have a lunchbox. He just sat, hands resting on his knees, and watched. He watched the kendo club practice their swings, the rhythmic thwack of bamboo on armor a steady beat in the air. He watched the student council president, Sona Citri, march across the courtyard with a stack of files, her expression one of permanent, stern focus. He watched a flash of crimson hair and a burst of laughter from a balcony of the old school building, recognizing it as the domain of the Occult Research Club. "You're making everyone nervous, you know." The voice was like honey and lightning, a smooth, playful purr with a dangerous spark hidden within. Naruto didn't turn. He had sensed her approach from the moment she'd left the old school building, her energy a curious mix of crackling electricity and a deep, resonant darkness. Akeno Hamejima, the priestess of thunder, and Rias Gramarie's queen, came to a stop beside his bench. She leaned against the tree, her voluptuous figure outlined perfectly by her uniform. It's not every day someone new comes along and makes the whole school forget how to breathe, she continued, a sly smile playing on her lips. I was curious. What kind of person could do that? Naruto finally turned his head, his deep blue eyes meeting her violet ones. He offered a small, disarming smile. Maybe they're just not used to someone who's comfortable with silence. Akino's smile widened. Most boys either flustered, preened, or became aggressively loud under her attention. He did none of those things. He met her gaze directly, his own calm a perfect counterpoint to her teasing energy. It was like dropping a pebble into the deepest part of the ocean. Comfortable with silence? She purred, taking a step closer. Or are you the cause of it? There's a big difference. She leaned down slightly, her face close to his, the scent of rain and ozone faintly clinging to her. Your energy, it's very strange. I've never felt anything like it. It's so still. Stillness has its own kind of power, he replied, his voice a low baritone. His eyes flicked down to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of her beauty that was far more potent than any clumsy compliment. It's the stillness of the desert right before a sandstorm. The stillness of a tomb that has been sealed for millennia. Akino felt a genuine shiver trace its way down her spine. It wasn't fear, but a thrill. His words resonated with the part of her she kept hidden, the heritage of the fallen, the darkness that she cloaked in smiles and sadism. He wasn't just speaking poetically, he was describing a truth she could feel in her very soul. My, she whispered, her voice dropping to a husky murmur. A poet. And here I thought you were just a delinquent. I can be whatever people need me to be, Naruto said, his smile turning faintly mischievous. A delinquent. A poet. A problem. He paused, his gaze intensifying slightly, or a solution. Before Akino could formulate a reply, another presence made itself known. It was sharp, orderly, and carried the weight of authority. Sona Sitri, flanked by her queen, Tsubaki Shinra, had stopped a few feet away. Uzumaki-san, Sona said, her tone crisp and formal. Her glasses glinted in the sun, hiding her eyes but not the intensity of her focus. Like Rias and Akino, she had felt it the moment he stepped on school grounds. A power so immense and so alien it registered as a blank spot on her senses. It wasn't demonic, holy, draconic, or anything in between. It was a void, a place where the normal rules of energy did not apply. President Sitri, Naruto acknowledged with a slight nod. I trust you are finding your transition to our academy satisfactory, she asked, though it was clear the question was a formality. It's quiet, he replied. I appreciate that. Sona's lips thinned. Quiet was the last word she would use to describe the undercurrent of panic he had caused. My office is always open to new students who may have unique circumstances, she said, her choice of words deliberate. In fact, I find myself with a free period. I would be interested in your perspective on a strategic problem. Perhaps a game of chess? It was a test. A transparent, but intelligent one. Chess was a game of logic, foresight, and strategy. It was a way for Sona to measure his mind without resorting to a direct confrontation. Akino watched with unconcealed amusement. The Stoic Student Council president was trying to cage this strange new storm in a box of 64 squares. Naruto looked from Sona's stern face to Akino's smiling one. He then rose from the bench in a single, smooth motion. I don't play chess, he said simply. Sona's eyebrow twitched. Oh, a preference for shogi, perhaps? No, Naruto replied, walking past her. He paused beside her shoulder, his voice dropping low enough for only her and Tsubaki to hear. I don't play games where the king has to hide behind his pawns. If a king is not the strongest piece on the board, he is not a king. He is a liability. He continued walking toward the school building without looking back. Sona Sitri stood frozen, his words echoing in her mind. It was a direct refutation of the entire philosophy of her world, of the system of peerages and kings that governed Devil Society. It was arrogant, heretical, and, coming from him, it felt like an undeniable truth. She turned to Tsubaki, whose usual calm expression was replaced by one of profound shock. Did you feel that, Tsubaki? Sona whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, Kaichu, Tsubaki replied, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of the demonic sword she could manifest. When he spoke, it was like the world agreed with him. Akino let out a soft, delighted laugh. This new boy was far more interesting than she could have ever imagined. He had unsettled the unflappable Sona's sea tree with a single sentence. She couldn't wait to tell Rias. Later that evening, the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the city. Naruto walked through the quieter, more derelict part of Kuo, a district of abandoned warehouses and crumbling factories. The air here was heavy with the smell of rust and decay, but also something else. A faint, cloying sweetness, like rotting meat and cheap perfume. It was the scent of a predator that had grown careless. He had felt it earlier in the day, a minor stain on the town's spiritual tapestry. A stray devil. Weak, but hungry. It had been preying on the lonely and the desperate, its presence a small but festering wound. Normally, the local devils, the Gremory clan, would handle such a thing. But this one was in his territory, and on his first day, it was important to set boundaries. He came to a stop before a large, corrugated steel warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, and the foul scent was thick here, emanating from within. He pushed the door open. The screech of rusted metal was the only sound. The interior was vast and cavernous, filled with the skeletons of old machinery. In the center of the room, a creature was hunched over a ragged bundle on the floor. It was vaguely humanoid, with gray, leathery skin, limbs that were too long, and a face that was a nightmare of needle-like teeth and multiple, glistening black eyes. It was chewing on something, the wet, tearing sounds echoing in the silence. It looked up as Naruto entered, a low growl rumbling in its chest. "Ooh, a new one," the stray hissed, its voice like grinding rocks. "You smell clean. Strong. Not like these other pathetic morsels." It gestured with a clawed hand at the bundle on the floor, which Naruto now saw was the tattered remains of a homeless man's coat. "You don't smell like the local filth, the Gremory pests. What are you?" Naruto didn't answer. He just started walking forward, his footsteps echoing rhythmically in the cavernous space. His posture was relaxed, his hands in his pockets. The stray devil's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the reaction it was used to. There was no fear, no posturing, no summoning of magic circles. There was just walking. "Don't ignore me," the stray shrieked, its pride wounded. It lunged, its form a blur of speed that would have been impossible for any normal human to track. Its claws, sharp as razors, aimed for Naruto's throat. Naruto didn't even seem to register the attack. He didn't sidestep or block. The claws came within an inch of his neck and then stopped, held fast as if they had struck an invisible wall of solid stone. The stray's eyes widened in shock, its entire arm trembling from the sudden, absolute halt. "My turn," Naruto said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. He took his right hand out of his pocket. He moved it so slowly it seemed to defy the urgency of the situation. The stray, paralyzed by the invisible force, could only watch in terror as Naruto's fingers came to rest on its forehead. The moment his skin made contact, the world went silent. For the stray, reality dissolved. It was no longer in a warehouse. It was in a vast, empty desert under a black sun. An immense weight crashed down on its soul, the pressure of eons of judgment. It felt its entire existence laid bare, every life it had taken, every moment of cruelty, every petty sin, all of it was being weighed on a scale it could not see. A voice, not Naruto's, but something infinitely older, echoed in the void of its mind. Verdict. Unbalanced. Unworthy. Erase. Back in the warehouse, the stray devil began to disintegrate. It didn't scream, because its throat had already turned to sand. Its limbs crumbled, its torso dissolved into a cascade of fine, golden dust. Within 3 seconds, all that was left of the creature was a pile of shimmering sand on the concrete floor, which then slowly dissipated into nothing, swept away by a non-existent breeze. Naruto stood there for a moment, his hand still outstretched. He flexed his fingers, then put his hand back in his pocket. He turned and walked out of the warehouse, leaving it as empty and silent as it had been for years. From the shadows atop a neighboring building, a small figure watched the entire exchange, her golden eyes wide with a mixture of awe and primal fear. Kaneko Taju, Rias Gremory's rook, had been tasked with observing the new student. Rias had felt the stray's presence as well and had sent Kaneko to deal with it, but she had arrived just in time to see Naruto walk into the warehouse first. She had been ready to intervene, to save the strange, confident boy from the stray, but what she had witnessed defied everything she knew. She was known for her immense physical strength, but what she had just seen was not strength. It was absolute authority. He hadn't fought the stray. He had unmade it. The power he used felt ancient, dry, and terrifyingly final. It felt like the grave. She clutched the railing in front of her, her knuckles white. She had to tell Rias, immediately. Rias Gramarie's POV. The occult research club room was bathed in the warm, gentle light of evening. It was my sanctuary, a piece of my home transplanted into the human world. The rich scent of tea, the comfortable familiarity of the velvet couch, the presence of my peerage, my family. It should have been peaceful. But tonight, the peace was a thin veneer over a simmering pot of anxiety. The source of that anxiety was sitting silently on a small stool in the corner of the room, nibbling on a chocolate bar. So, let me get this straight, Issei said, his voice breaking the tense silence. He had been a member of my peerage for only a short time, and his earnest confusion was often a welcome distraction. This new guy, Naruto, shows up. Sona tries to play chess with him, and he basically tells her that kings are supposed to be bullies? That's a crude simplification, Issei-kun, I replied, swirling the black tea in my porcelain cup. He presented an alternative philosophy of power. One based on personal strength rather than delegation. He called her a liability, Yuto Kiba added, his handsome face unusually serious. He polished his sword, Caliburn, a nervous habit. To her face. The audacity is remarkable. Era, Akeno chimed in, pouring herself another cup of tea. Her smile was as radiant as ever, but I could see the excited glint in her eyes. She was thrilled by the day's events. I thought it was rather dashing. He wasn't afraid of her at all, and the way he looked at me. I sighed, setting my cup down. Akeno, please. This is serious. We have an unknown entity of immense power enrolled in our school, operating in our territory. We know nothing about him. We know one thing, a quiet voice said. All heads turned to Kaneko. She had been silent since she had returned half an hour ago, her usual stoicism amplified to an almost painful degree. She looked pale. I followed him, like you asked, bucko, she said, her voice flat. He went after the stray devil in the warehouse district. Issei puffed out his chest. You should have let me handle that. I could have. Quiet, Issei, I said gently, my focus entirely on my rook. What happened, Kaneko-chan? Kaneko took a deep breath. The stray attacked him. It was fast, faster than me, maybe. This admission alone sent a ripple of shock through the room. He didn't move. The stray's claws just stopped. In the air. Then he touched its forehead. She paused, her golden eyes distant, replaying the memory. The stray turned to sand. It just fell apart. There was no magic circle, no incantation. Just a touch. And then it was gone. The energy he used, it felt like death. Not like a soul reaper. It felt like the ground itself. Old and dry and final. The room was utterly silent. Issei's bravado had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. Kiba had stopped polishing his sword. Even Akino's smile had faded, a flicker of something deeper awe, perhaps in her expression. Turned to sand. The power to not just kill, but to erase. To unmake something at a fundamental level. That was not the power of a devil, an angel, or a fallen. It was something else entirely. Something ancient. Sona's words from our brief, tense phone call earlier echoed in my mind. His power is a void, Rias. A place where our rules don't apply. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. For weeks, my nights had been haunted by the impending arrival of my fiancé, Riser Phoenix. His arrogant face, his possessive words, the helplessness of my situation. It was a cage slowly closing around me. I had been so focused on that singular problem that I had viewed everything else as a distraction. But this was not a distraction. This was a force of nature that had just walked into my life. A sandstorm, as he had told Akeno. A silent, walking tomb. Was he a threat? An ally? A catastrophe waiting to happen? We need to approach him, I said, my voice firm, betraying none of the fear I felt. We need to know who he is, and what he wants in Kuo. Akeno, Kiba, Kaneko, Issei. We go now. My peerage stood, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and resolve. They were my family, my strength, and I would not let them face this unknown alone. We found him easily. He was sitting on a park bench overlooking the city, the lights of Kuo twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The oppressive aura from the classroom was gone, or perhaps simply retracted, leaving only a profound sense of calm. He didn't seem surprised to see us. As we approached, he turned his head, his deep blue eyes seeming to look right through me, into the heart of my deepest anxieties. I stopped a few feet from him, my peerage fanning out behind me in a protective formation. I took a breath, preparing the formal greeting I had rehearsed, the careful speech designed to be respectful yet firm. Uzumaki-san, I am Rias Gremory, he interrupted, his voice calm and even. He rose from the bench and took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. Heiress to the house of Gremory. King of this peerage. Sister of the Mao Lucifer. He recited the titles with no particular reverence, simply as statements of fact. I was stunned into silence. He knew. Of course, he knew. You're worried about the wrong things, Rias Gremory, he continued, his expression softening into something that looked almost like sympathy. It was a look that unnerved me more than any threat could have. Your territory, this school, me, we are not your real problem. He took another step, closing the distance between us until he was standing directly in front of me. The air crackled with the combined demonic energy of my peerage, ready to spring to my defense at a moment's notice. But I didn't feel threatened. I felt seen. Your real problem, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is arriving from the underworld soon. He is arrogant, he is cruel, and he believes his fire makes him a god. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. No one in the human world was supposed to know. The engagement was a private, political matter within the devil nobility. It had not been announced. He looked at me, his blue eyes holding a universe of ancient knowledge, and delivered the final, devastating blow to my composure. You shouldn't have to marry a man like Riser Phoenix. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Chapter 2. A verdict of ash and embers. The words hung in the cool night air, heavy and absolute. You shouldn't have to marry a man like Riser Phoenix. It wasn't a question or an opinion. It was a declaration, spoken with the same finality as a judge passing sentence. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it contained only the two of them, the twinkling city lights below fading into an insignificant blur. My mind, usually a fortress of calm strategy and noble composure, was a maelstrom. How could he possibly know? The engagement was a high-level political arrangement, a desperate move by my family to ensure the purity of the Gremory bloodline. It was a secret kept within the highest echelons of the underworld. For this boy, this enigma of stillness and sand, to speak of it so casually in a human park was impossible. It was like a fish describing the mechanics of the sun. Behind me, I could feel the coiled tension of my peerage. Yuto's hand was no doubt gripping the hilt of his sword. Akino's playful aura had sharpened, the scent of ozone growing stronger. Kaneko was a statue of murderous intent. Issei, bless his simple heart, was just utterly confused, but his loyalty meant he was ready to charge on my command. Who are you? I finally managed to ask, my voice a strained whisper. It was the only question that mattered. Naruto's expression remained unchanged, his deep blue eyes holding mine. I'm the one who knows, he said simply, as if that were a complete answer. The world is full of whispers, Rias Gremory. You just have to be quiet enough to hear them. Your anxiety about this marriage is so loud it's a shout. He wasn't wrong. For weeks, my fear had been a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach. To think it was so palpable that he could somehow read it. He took a half step back, breaking the intense proximity and giving me room to breathe. The gesture was disarming, a silent acknowledgement that he had pushed me off balance and was now allowing me to recover. You have questions, he stated, and I have time. Your clubhouse seems like a more private venue for this conversation than a public park. He was giving me back control, or at least the illusion of it. It was a masterful stroke of social maneuvering. He had demonstrated his knowledge, established his power, and now offered a civil discussion on my own terms. To refuse would be foolish. To accept felt like walking willingly into a lion's den, even if that den was my own home. Follow us, I said, my voice regaining its usual regal tone. I turned, not waiting for his reply, and began walking back toward the old school building, my peerage falling into formation around me. I could hear his steady footsteps behind us, a calm, rhythmic presence that felt both like a shield at our backs and a blade to our throats. The walk back to the Occult Research Club was silent, a stark contrast to our tense journey out. My mind raced, trying to formulate a strategy. What leverage did I have? What could I offer him? What did he want? He was a being who could unmake a devil with a touch and casually speak of the underworld's most guarded secrets. What could a high school-aged devil princess possibly offer a creature like that? We entered the familiar warmth of the clubroom. I took my seat behind my desk, my throne, while my peerage arranged themselves around the room, creating an unspoken cordon between me and the newcomer. Naruto, however, seemed completely oblivious to the carefully constructed power dynamics. He ignored the chairs facing my desk and walked over to the large window overlooking the school grounds, his back to all of us. "You have a good territory," he commented, his voice thoughtful. "The ley lines here are strong, stable. It's a peaceful place. You've done well to cultivate that." "Thank you," I said, thrown off by the compliment. "Now, Uzumaki-san, I demand an explanation. Your knowledge of my affairs is a serious breach." He turned from the window, a faint, almost pitying smile on his lips. "Demand? You are not in a position to demand anything from me, Rias. You are in a position to ask for help." The bluntness of his words struck me like a physical blow. Issei bristled. "Hey! You can't talk to Bucko like that." Naruto's gaze shifted to Issei. It wasn't angry or menacing. It was analytical, like a master craftsman inspecting a flawed piece of wood. "Issei Hyodo, the wielder of the boosted gear. A Longinus-class sacred gear, inhabited by the Welsh dragon, Diedrich. You have the potential to kill gods, yet you are currently little more than a loud-mouthed child who can't even activate his balance breaker. You are loyal, and your heart is good. But in a real fight, you would be the first to die. Do not speak to me of what I can and cannot do." Every word was a hammer blow of truth. Issei paled, stumbling back as if he'd been struck. He had never told anyone outside the peerage about Diedrich. To have his power, his potential, and his greatest weakness laid so bare by a stranger was completely unnerving. "Enough," I commanded, my voice sharp. Naruto's gaze returned to me. "What is your purpose here?" "I told you. I like the quiet," he said. "Your fiancé is a disruption to that quiet. His energy is loud, arrogant, and abrasive. It grates on the air. His arrival will bring conflict and pain to people I have no wish to see harmed. Therefore, his influence must be curtailed." It was the most unbelievable and yet strangely believable motive I had ever heard. He wasn't here for power, or territory, or to serve some master. He was here because Riser Phoenix annoyed him. The sheer, godlike arrogance of it was breathtaking. Before I could process this, the air in the room shifted. It grew thick, heavy, and hot, like the blast from an open furnace. The magical circle on the floor, usually dormant, flared to life with a sigil I knew all too well. The fiery bird of the House of Phoenix. A column of brilliant orange flame erupted from the circle, licking at the ceiling before coalescing into a group of figures. At their center was a young man with blonde hair styled in a way that screamed for attention. He wore flamboyant red and gold clothing that was utterly tasteless. This was Riser Phoenix. His face was handsome in a conventional sense, but it was marred by a sneer of innate superiority. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on me with a possessive heat that made my skin crawl, before flicking dismissively over my peerage. "Rias, my darling," he crowed, his voice grating. "Riser has come for you. I trust you have prepared for our grand union? We shall burn with passion for 1,000? His tirade cut off abruptly. His eyes had landed on Naruto, who still stood calmly by the window, his expression one of mild distaste, as if he'd just smelled something unpleasant. "And what is this?" Riser sneered, gesturing contemptuously at Naruto. "Did you pick up another stray, Rias? This one doesn't even have the decency to kneel. Has Riser's beloved forgotten her manners?" My entire body went rigid with fury. Akino's smile became a predatory baring of teeth. "He is a guest, Riser," I said through clenched teeth. "A guest?" Riser laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "In my presence, there are no guests. Only servants and decorations. This one appears to be neither." He snapped his fingers. "Yubaluna, teach this trash some respect." A woman with striking purple hair, Riser's queen, stepped forward. A vortex of violet energy formed in her hand. "With pleasure, Lord Riser." She launched a blast of demonic power directly at Naruto. It was a powerful attack, enough to blast a hole through the wall of the building. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised a hand, palm open. The blast of energy hit his palm and vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't deflect. It was simply gone. As if it had been poured into a bottomless well. A stunned silence fell over the room. Yubaluna stared, her mouth agape. Riser's sneer faltered. Impressive, Naruto said, his voice flat. He lowered his hand. You managed to waste that much energy and still miss. That takes a special kind of incompetence. Riser's face contorted with rage. You dare mock the power of the House of Phoenix? I am Riser Phoenix, an immortal. A pillar of the underworld. You are nothing. You are less than the dirt beneath my heel. He burst into flames, his body wreathed in the brilliant orange fire of his clan. The heat in the room became intense, suffocating. Riser will burn you to cinders that even time will forget. He lunged, his hand outstretched, a concentrated stream of hellfire shooting towards Naruto. It was his signature attack, a blast hot enough to vaporize steel. Naruto watched it approach with an unblinking gaze. Then, he did something that broke the laws of reality as I knew them. He inhaled. He took a deep, slow breath, and the torrent of flame wavered, bent, and then flowed into his mouth, disappearing entirely. The room returned to its normal temperature. Naruto swallowed, a faint trail of smoke escaping his lips. He looked at Riser with an expression of profound disappointment. All that heat and no flavor, he said. A pity. Riser Phoenix, the immortal devil famed for his unquenchable flames, stood frozen in shock, his fire literally stolen from him. His entire peerage looked on in horror. My own family was equally stunned. Issei was clutching his head, Diedrich no doubt screaming in his mind at the impossibility of what he was seeing. That's not possible, Riser stammered, his arrogance finally cracking to reveal the terrified child beneath. Many things are possible, Naruto replied, taking a step forward. It is your imagination that is limited, not the world. He turned his gaze to me. Rias Grammary. The custom of your people dictates a rating game to settle this dispute. A foolish tradition, pitting your small, inexperienced family against his. A group of 16 who have fought together for decades. It is a rigged game, designed for you to lose. He then looked back at Riser, whose face was now a mask of pure, unadulterated fear. I do not play rigged games. He turned back to me, his blue eyes searching mine. So I offer you a choice. You can proceed with this farce. You can fight, and lose, and be bound to this thing. Or you can give me your consent to settle this matter. My way. Permanently. The room was silent save for the crackling of the Phoenix magical circle on the floor. This was it. The crossroads. My pride, my lineage, my duty, all of it screamed at me to fight my own battles. The Grammary name was not one that hid behind others, but I looked at my peerage. I saw Issei, brave but hopelessly outmatched. I saw Kaneko, whose small frame would be pitted against brutes. I saw Yuto and Akeno, who would fight to the death for me and likely be forced to. And I saw the alternative. A being who ate hellfire for breakfast and spoke of impossibilities as if they were mundane. Riser, seeing my hesitation, regained a sliver of his bravado. He thought my reluctance was fear of him. That's right, Rias. You know your place. You belong to Riser. This nobody can do nothing. He then did the one thing that sealed his fate. He looked at my peerage with utter contempt and spat on the floor. And Riser will have much fun breaking in your little pets after our wedding. That was it. The final thread of my restraint snapped. I looked at Naruto, my eyes burning with unshed tears of fury and desperation. I gave him a single, sharp nod. Do it. Naruto's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. As you wish. He started walking towards Riser. Riser, in a panic, shrieked and unleashed everything he had. A massive wave of fire, far larger than before, erupted from his body, consuming the space between them. Burn. Burn and die. Naruto walked directly into the inferno. For a horrifying moment, his silhouette was visible within the flames, and then he vanished. Riser laughed, a hysterical, relieved sound. See? See? He was nothing, nothing before the might of Phoenix? Are you sure about that? Naruto's voice asked, calm and conversational, from directly behind him. Riser froze. He spun around. Naruto stood there, not a single scorch mark on his clothes, not a hair out of place. He hadn't a speck of soot on him. He had walked through the fire as if it were a morning mist. Before Riser could scream, Naruto's hand shot out and rested gently on his chest, right over his heart. "You take pride in the flame that restores you," Naruto said, his voice soft, yet it carried throughout the entire room, silencing all other sound. "You believe your immortality makes you unaccountable. You use it to shield yourself from consequence, to inflict pain without fear of reprisal." Naruto's eyes began to glow with a faint, golden light, like embers in the dark. The air grew cold, heavy, and ancient, thick with the weight of judgment. Every soul is a scale. It has weights and measures. Yours is grievously unbalanced. Riser began to tremble, not from fear, but from a force acting upon him. He looked down and saw his own hand, which he had raised to try and push Naruto away. A small cut he'd gotten earlier from a sharp piece of his own armor was bleeding. It was a tiny thing, but for a phoenix, whose regeneration was instantaneous, it was a cataclysm. What are you doing to me?" he whimpered, his voice cracking. Naruto's gaze was pitiless. "I am judging you. Your arrogance. Your cruelty to those weaker than you. The way you treat your own peerage, not as comrades, but as disposable tools. I have seen the truth of you, Riser Phoenix." He leaned in closer, his voice a whisper that was a roar in the tomb like silence. "Your verdict is consequence." A soft golden light enveloped Riser's body. He screamed, a raw, piercing shriek of pure agony. It wasn't the pain of being burned or cut, but the pain of something being torn from his very soul. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. The flames that always wreathed his body sputtered and died, leaving only faint wisps of smoke. He looked up at Naruto, his face a mess of tears and terror. "My fire, my healing, it's gone." Naruto removed his hand. "Not gone. Just balanced. You will still heal, like a mortal man. Slowly. Painfully. Every scar you earn from now on will be a reminder of this moment. You are no longer immortal. You are just another devil." He turned his back on the broken, sobbing form of Riser Phoenix. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Riser's pathetic whimpers. His entire peerage, including the formidable Yubaluna, stared in abject horror, too terrified to move, to even breathe. Just then, the Phoenix magical circle flared again, this time with an intensity that spoke of immense power. An older, more regal devil with the same blonde hair as Riser appeared, his face a mask of concern. "Lord Phoenix." "Riser. What is the meaning of this disturbance? I felt your connection to the family flame flicker." His eyes then fell upon his weeping son, and then to the bleeding cut on his hand. His aristocratic face lost all color. He looked from his broken son to Naruto, who stood impassively, and the realization dawned on his face. The anger he might have felt was instantly consumed by a wave of primal, instinctual terror. He, a great lord of the underworld, stumbled forward and gave a deep, trembling bow towards Naruto. "Forgive him," Lord Phoenix pleaded, his voice shaking. "Forgive my foolish son's arrogance, Great One. The engagement is null and void. We will leave. We will never bother the house of Gremory again. I beg you, do not judge the rest of my house for his sins." Naruto glanced at the bowing lord. "Take him and go," he said, his voice dismissive. "He is no longer my concern." Without another word, Lord Phoenix grabbed his son, his peerage scrambled to join them, and they vanished in a desperate flash of fire. Graphia Lucifuge's POV. I stood cloaked by a concealment spell in the corner of the room, my presence undetectable to all but the most powerful of beings. Sirzex had tasked me with observing the proceedings of Ria Sajo-sama's engagement meeting, a formality that had just become the single most terrifying event I had witnessed since the Great War. My mind, trained for detached analysis, was struggling to process the data. It was impossible. The regenerative ability of the Phoenix clan was not a spell or learned technique. It was a biological, genetic, and spiritual constant, woven into their very being. It was a law of their existence. And this boy, Naruto Uzumaki, had treated that law like a suggestion. I hadn't felt him use demonic power. There was no surge of holy energy. It was not draconic, nor was it related to any known magical system, human or otherwise. When he had placed his hand on Riser Phoenix, The flow of demonic energy within Riser had not been nullified or suppressed. It had been rewritten. I had felt the fundamental formula of his soul A plus B equals immortality be forcibly changed to A plus B equals mortality. It was the power to edit reality itself. This was not a warrior who had defeated an enemy. This was a god who had passed judgment. My report to Sirzex would be difficult to write. How could I quantify this? Subject displayed the ability to redefine the conceptual nature of another being via physical contact and a verbal declaration. It sounded like madness. When Lord Phoenix, a being of immense standing, had bowed to the boy, it was not out of political necessity. It was the fear of an old god facing a new one. A more fundamental one. Lord Phoenix had not felt his son being defeated. He had felt the foundation of his entire house, his entire identity, being threatened with erasure. I had to report this. Now. The balance of power between the three factions, devils, angels, and fallen angels, was a delicate, fragile thing. This boy was not a weight placed on one side of the scale. He was a hand, reaching down to shatter the scale entirely. As I prepared to teleport, my eyes met his for a fraction of a second. The boy, Naruto, glanced directly at my position. His blue eyes saw me. I felt it. He saw through my spell, my rank, my purpose. And in his eyes, I saw no threat, no malice. I saw only a quiet, ancient acknowledgement. Then he gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod, and turned away. My blood ran cold. He had known I was here the entire time. I vanished, my heart pounding with a fear I had not felt in centuries. The air in the occult research club room slowly returned to normal. The oppressive heat of the Phoenix clan was gone, replaced by a stunned, deafening silence. Riser's whimpering, Lord Phoenix pleading, it all felt like a fever dream. The only proof it had happened was the faint scorch mark on the floor and the lingering scent of ozone and fear. I looked at my peerage. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with shock. Kiba was staring at the spot where Riser had knelt. Akino's fan was hiding her expression, but her knuckles were white. Kaneko was watching Naruto with an unreadable expression, and Issei looked like he was about to be sick. The source of their shock, Naruto, stretched his arms above his head with a soft groan, like a man waking from a nap. The terrifying, godlike being of judgment was gone, replaced once more by the calm, handsome teenager. The shift was so total, so jarring, it was almost more frightening than the power he had displayed. He turned to face us, a warm, easy smile on his face. The golden glow in his eyes was gone, leaving only the deep, endless blue. "Well," he said, his voice casual and light. "That's settled. The engagement is cancelled." He looked directly at me, his smile softening. "You're free, Rias." I couldn't speak. I could only stare, my mind a blank slate. The cage that had been closing around me for months had been shattered, its architect broken and humiliated, its bars melted away. I was free. The relief was so overwhelming it was paralyzing. Naruto's stomach then let out a loud, rumbling growl. He blinked, looking down at his midsection in surprise, then laughed. It was a genuine, pleasant sound that seemed utterly alien in the wake of what had just occurred. "Right," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I skipped lunch." He looked around at our stunned faces, his smile turning into a charming grin. "All that judging works up an appetite. Now, how about we get some dinner?" Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Whispers of the Unholy and the Ancient. The question hung in the air, so absurdly mundane it bordered on the surreal. Now, how about we get some dinner? For a solid 10 seconds, the only response was the sound of 7 people breathing. The occult research club room, moments ago the stage for a reality-bending display of divine judgment, was now host to a simple, awkwardly timed dinner invitation. It was Issei who broke the spell. His face, which had been a pale shade of green, slowly regained some color. "Dinner?" he squeaked, his voice cracking. "Dude, you just, and now you're hungry?" Naruto turned his charming, easygoing smile on him. "Judgment is hard work," he said, patting his stomach. "It burns a lot of calories. Way more than you'd think." The sheer, unadulterated normality of his tone was a psychological battering ram. It shattered the last vestiges of the terrifying tension that had gripped the room. It was impossible to maintain a state of awestruck terror in the face of a man complaining about being peckish after rewriting the soul of an immortal devil. A choked sound escaped from beside me. I turned to see Akeno, her fan pressed to her lips, her shoulders shaking. She was trying to suppress a fit of laughter. The sight was so infectious, so utterly at odds with the gravity of the situation, that a bubble of hysteria rose in my own chest. I clamped a hand over my mouth, my eyes wide. Yuto, ever the gentleman, simply looked bewildered, as if his brain was still trying to reconcile the two versions of Naruto it had just witnessed. Kaneko just stared, her expression as flat as ever, though she did pocket the chocolate bar she'd been saving. I suppose, I managed, my voice unsteady. We could get some dinner. It was the most ridiculous sentence I had ever uttered. My fiancé had just been spiritually neutered and banished. My family's honor had been saved. The political landscape of the underworld had been irrevocably altered, and we were going to get pizza. And so we did. The walk to a nearby family restaurant was a study in surrealism. Naruto walked beside me, his hands casually tucked in his pockets, making small talk about the town's architecture. He pointed out a shrine he found interesting, commented on the quality of the pavement, and asked Issei about his favorite video games. He was, for all intents and purposes, a normal, friendly, charismatic teenage boy. My peerage, however, walked as if they were escorting an unpinned grenade. They kept a careful distance, their senses on high alert, constantly glancing at him as if expecting him to suddenly turn a lamppost into sand. We found a large booth in a cheerfully lit restaurant. The moment we sat, Naruto's persona shifted from casual observer to gracious host. He didn't dominate the conversation, but guided it, asking Yuto about his swordsmanship with genuine interest, complimenting Akeno on her tea-making skills, which he somehow knew about, and even managing to draw Kaneko into a brief discussion about different types of cats. He navigated my family's shell-shocked state with an effortless social grace that was as impressive as his power display. So, he said, after we had ordered a frankly obscene amount of food. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his expression turning serious for the first time since we left the clubhouse. He addressed us all. Let's talk about what happened. The lighthearted atmosphere evaporated. Issei gulped. Riser Phoenix was a problem, Naruto began, his voice low and even. A symptom of a sickness in your world. The belief that power and bloodline grant entitlement. I removed him as a threat to you, Rias. But in doing so, I've created a new problem. What you did, Yuto said, choosing his words carefully, it shouldn't be possible. You changed what he was. Everything that is made can be unmade, Naruto replied calmly. Everything that is written can be erased. I am an editor. Of sorts. The problem is that I just made a very public edit to a story that a lot of powerful people thought they were in control of. You need to be prepared for the fallout. My mind, finally clear of the immediate shock, began to work again. He was right. The ripples were already spreading. The Devil Council, I breathed. My brother, Sears X. They'll be afraid, Naruto stated, not with pride, but as a simple fact. Not angry, not yet. They'll be afraid because I represent a power that operates outside their laws. A power they can't control, bribe, or intimidate. They will watch. They will be cautious. The fallen angels? Akeno asked, her voice losing its usual teasing lilt. Her heritage made her particularly sensitive to that faction. Their leader, Azazel, is a scholar at heart. He's curious. He collects dangerous things. Right now, he sees me as the most interesting specimen he's ever encountered. He'll watch, too. But he has members who are less patient. His eyes flickered with a dark light. Some see chaos as an opportunity. And the other side? Issei asked timidly. You know, angels? Heaven? Naruto leaned back as the waitress arrived with our drinks. He thanked her with a smile that made her blush, then turned back to us. Heaven has the biggest problem, he said quietly. Their entire system is built on the concept of a single, ultimate judgment. I just proved that's not true. I've introduced a competing model. They will see me as a heretic, a blasphemy, an existential threat to their entire worldview. They will be the most likely to act rashly. He had laid out the new political landscape of the world in the time it took for our drinks to arrive. He had considered every angle, every faction, every possible reaction. He wasn't just a powerhouse, he was a strategic genius of the highest order. So what do we do? I asked, the weight of it all settling on me. Naruto took a sip of his water. He looked at me, his blue eyes clear and direct. For now, nothing. You do nothing. You go to school. You train. You live your lives. You are the Grammary peerage. You have a territory to protect. Let them whisper. Let them watch. The first one to move will reveal their intentions. And I will be waiting. He then smiled, the warmth returning to his face as the food began to arrive. But first, we eat. This pizza looks amazing. And just like that, the council of war was over, and dinner began. Watching him devour 3 slices of pizza with genuine enjoyment was the most cognitively dissonant experience of my life. Location: Underworld, capital city of Lilith. Seers X Lucifer, the crimson-haired Satan, stood before a vast, enchanted window displaying a swirling nebula of demonic energy. His usual calm and gentle demeanor was absent, replaced by a deep, thoughtful frown. Beside him, the silver-haired maid, Graphia Lucifuge, stood as still as a statue. He knew you were there, Graphia, Seers X said, his voice a low murmur. From the beginning. He allowed you to watch. Yes, Lucifer Sama, she replied, her own voice betraying a hint of the chill she still felt. His perception is absolute. I have never encountered anything like it. And his power. Seers X paced the room. Your report was concise. He edited Riser's soul. He rewrote a biological constant. This isn't the power of destruction, like my own. That, I can understand. That has limits. This is the power of creation and uncreation. The kind of power my father and the original Satans coveted. The power the God of the Bible wielded when he created the system we all live within. He stopped and turned to her, his violet eyes, so like his sister's, filled with a gravity she had not seen in centuries. This Naruto Uzumaki is not a new player in our game, Graphia. He is playing an entirely different game, on a board we cannot see. We cannot treat him as an enemy. To do so would be to declare war on a concept we do not understand, and that is a war we would lose. What are your orders, my lord? Watch, Seers X said simply. Tell Rias to continue as normal. Extend every courtesy to this boy. Find out what he wants. And pray to a god I know is dead that what he wants is peace. Location: the 7th heaven. The archangel Michael stood in the garden of the Empyrean, the light of heaven reflecting off his 12 golden wings. Before him, the angel Gabriel and the seraph Uriel stood with troubled expressions. It is true, then, Michael said, his voice like the chiming of 1,000 bells. A power of judgment, outside of Father's system, has manifested in the human world. It crippled a high-class devil of the Phoenix clan, Lord Michael, Gabriel reported. It did not use holy power. Our sensors detected no celestial energy whatsoever. It was something else. Something ancient and neutral. The scales of justice, Uriel murmured, his brow furrowed. Our Father created them. He is the ultimate arbiter of sin. For another to wield such authority, it is a heresy of the highest order. It suggests that Father's law is not the only law. It must be a trick. A demonic power masquerading as something divine. Michael shook his head slowly. No, Uriel. I do not believe it is a trick. I believe it is a truth we have forgotten. There were powers in this world long before the Great War. Ancient things that slept. It seems one of them has awakened. He looked down towards the human world, his gaze filled with a profound sadness. The system has been so fragile since Father's death. This could shatter it. Send agents. Not to attack. To observe. I want to know everything about this being. Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shidu are already in Japan. Task them with this. Location: Grigori, the fallen angels' headquarters. Azazel, the governor of the fallen angels, laughed. He threw his head back and let out a booming laugh that echoed through his research laboratory. On dozens of screens around him were replays of the events in the Orc room, captured by his familiars. Incredible. Absolutely incredible, he exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with manic glee. He ate it. He just ate Riser's fire. And the judgment. Oh, the sheer elegance of it. Not killing him, just taking away the one thing he valued most. It's beautiful. Governor, said the fallen angel Shemazai, his second in command. This is a serious development. This being's power is unknown. It could destabilize everything. Of course it's serious. That's what makes it so much fun. Azazel grinned, grabbing a notepad. Think of the research possibilities. Is it genetic? Metaphysical? A form of soul manipulation we've never documented? His sacred gear must be off the charts? We detected no sacred gear, Governor, Shemazai said dryly. The power appears to be innate to him. Azazel's grin widened even further. Even better. A natural-born monster. This changes everything. The Chaos Brigade will be interested. Kokabiel will be, well, Kokabiel will be an idiot about it, as usual. He tapped his chin. Keep watching him. I want to know what makes him tick. I want to know what he bleeds. This is the most exciting thing to happen in 1,000 years. 2 days passed in a state of surreal calm. Naruto attended classes as if nothing had happened. His presence was still a source of quiet tension in the school, but the students were slowly growing accustomed to it. He would join us in the orc room after school, sometimes reading a book from our library, other times simply sitting and observing our training with a critical but silent eye. His presence was grounding. The dread of Riser was gone, and while the fear of the future lingered, having the source of that future sitting on the couch, arguing with Issei about the merits of different ramen toppings, made it seem manageable. It was on the 3rd day that I felt a subtle shift in him. A new stillness. He was in the clubroom, watching me go over some paperwork, when he spoke. She is afraid, he said quietly, not looking up from the page of the book he was reading. I paused. Who? Kaneko-chan, he replied. His use of the affectionate suffix was surprising. She hides it well. But her soul is trembling. Like a kitten in a thunderstorm. I looked over at Kaneko, who was curled up on the sofa, seemingly asleep. She did seem more withdrawn than usual today. She has nightmares, sometimes, I admitted softly, from her past. Naruto closed his book. Her past is not just a memory, it's a cage. She's afraid of what she is. He stood up and walked over to the sofa. He didn't loom over her. He simply knelt down so he was at her eye level, even though her eyes were closed. He didn't touch her. There is no shame in being a monster, Kaneko-chan, he said, his voice a gentle murmur. I am a monster. Akeno-san carries a monster within her. Even Rias hides a monster of destruction behind her kind heart. A monster is just a name for power that others do not understand. Kaneko's eyes slowly opened. They were filled with a raw, desperate fear that she rarely showed anyone. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She was a Nekomata, a species of yokai hunted and feared, a survivor of a massacre that had claimed her sister. She lived in constant fear of her power, of losing control, of being abandoned again. You are not a stray, Naruto continued, his voice wrapping around her like a warm blanket. You are not a weapon. You are a member of this family. And you are a guardian. Your strength is a shield for them. Let it be a shield. Not a chain. He reached out, not to her, but to the tear on her cheek. He gently wiped it away with his thumb. You are safe here, he whispered. I will not let anyone hurt you, and I will not let you hurt yourself. Kaneko stared at him, her lips trembling. Then, she did something I had never seen her do with anyone besides me. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder, a silent, profound gesture of trust. Naruto simply remained there, kneeling, a silent, solid pillar for her to lean on. Akeno and I watched, our hearts aching for our young friend. In that moment, I understood that Naruto's power wasn't just judgment or sand. It was a terrifying, absolute empathy. He didn't just see power levels, he saw souls. The tender moment was broken by a sharp, intrusive feeling. 2 powerful, unfamiliar energies had just entered our territory. They were bright, aggressive, and felt like polished steel. Holy. Yuto appeared at the door. Bucko. We have visitors. 2 of them. They feel like the church. Naruto gently eased Kaneko back onto the sofa, her expression now calm for the first time in days. He stood up and turned to me. Let them come, he said. It was only a matter of time. Xenovia Quarta's POV. The town of Kuo was sickeningly peaceful. It reeked of demonic energy, a deeply ingrained taint that clung to the very air, yet the humans here went about their lives in blissful ignorance. It was a festering wound, masked by a thin veneer of normalcy. My partner, Irina, was chattering excitedly about the local crepe shops, her cheerful nature a stark contrast to the grim purpose of our mission. Focus, Irina, I snapped, my hand resting on the cloth-wrapped handle of my sword, Durandal. We are not here for sightseeing. We are here to investigate an anomaly. A power that neutralized a high-ranking devil without the use of a sacred gear or holy energy. I know, Zeno-chan. She chirped. But it's just, this is Issei-kun's hometown. It's been so long since I've seen him. I sighed. Irina's past friendship with the boy now housing the boosted gear was a complication. Our mission directive from Lord Michael was clear. Observe the source of the anomaly, identify it, and await further instructions. We were told his name was Naruto Uzumaki. We found him at the local school, in a building that pulsed with the energy of the Gremory clan. A den of devils. We walked into the clubroom without knocking. The air was thick with demonic power. The Gremory heiress sat behind a desk, flanked by her peerage. They were all on guard. But my eyes, and the senses of Durandal, were drawn to the one who felt like a void. He stood by the window, his blonde hair catching the afternoon light. He didn't feel demonic. He didn't feel like anything. He was a hole in the spiritual world, and it was deeply unsettling. He had to be the one. Rias Gremory, I said, my voice hard. We are here on behalf of the church. We have questions about an event that occurred here 3 days ago. The crimson-haired devil princess raised an eyebrow. The church has no authority in my territory. Our authority comes from God, I retorted, stepping forward. My eyes were locked on the blonde boy. We are here for him. I directed all my focus, all my conviction, all my holy will at him. Normally, a being of darkness would recoil, hiss, or show some sign of discomfort in the face of a true believer wielding a holy relic. The boy, Naruto, simply turned his head and met my gaze. His blue eyes were as calm and deep as the ocean. He showed no reaction at all. It was like trying to intimidate a mountain by shouting at it. You have questions for me? He asked, his voice even. I drew Durandal, unwrapping its cloth binding. The legendary blade, once wielded by the great paladin Roland, hummed with holy power, filling the room with a brilliant, pure light. The devils all flinched, shielding their eyes. All except him. He looked at the blade with mild interest. I am Zenobia Quarta. This is the holy sword Durandal, I announced. I have come to pass judgment on the heretic who dares to wield a power that mocks God's own. I expected fear. I expected anger. I expected some monstrous transformation. What I got was a soft, pitying smile. Judgment? He repeated, taking a step towards me. That is a heavy word to throw around, little paladin. I am a servant of the one true God. It is my sacred duty, I declared, raising Durandal's tip to point at his heart. He didn't stop. He continued his slow, deliberate walk until the razor-sharp tip of the most powerful holy sword in existence was pressing against his chest. He didn't even flinch. Tell me, Zenobia Quarta, he said, his voice dropping to a low, conversational tone. He gestured at the sword. This blade is a symbol of your faith, yes? A tool to smite evil. It is the wrath of God made manifest. Then tell me, he continued, his blue eyes searching mine, looking past my bravado, past my faith, and into the core of me. What evil have I done? I stopped a forced marriage. I saved a young woman from a lifetime of misery at the hands of a cruel man. I punished an arrogant bully. Which of these acts was evil? Which of these acts would your God disapprove of? My breath caught in my throat. His questions were like sharp little knives, bypassing the armor of my faith and slipping between my ribs. You used an unholy power. You interfered in the affairs of devils. Is the distinction between holy and unholy determined by its source, or by its effect? He countered, his voice relentlessly calm. If a devil's power is used to save an innocent, is it still evil? If a holy power is used to condemn a man for an act of kindness, is it still good? He took another step forward, forcing me to take a step back. The tip of Durandal was still pressed against him. You serve a God who has been silent for centuries. You follow orders from men and angels who interpret his will. How can you be so certain that their will is his will? How can you be so certain your judgment is righteous, and not just convenient? Do not speak blasphemy, I snarled, but my voice lacked its earlier conviction. A cold seed of doubt was beginning to sprout in my heart. It is not blasphemy to ask questions, Zenobia, he said softly. It is the foundation of true faith. Blind obedience is not faith. It is fear. He reached up and gently pushed the blade of Durandal away from his chest with his bare fingers. The holy power that should have seared his flesh like acid did nothing. He was completely immune. Your sword is beautiful. A magnificent tool. But a tool is only as good as the hand that wields it. And your hand is beginning to tremble. I looked down. He was right. My hand, the hand that had held Durandal through countless battles without a tremor, was shaking. My faith, the bedrock of my entire existence, was cracking. His power wasn't just immunity to holy weapons. It was the power to unravel a person's soul with nothing but questions. Suddenly, a series of small explosions rocked the school grounds outside. A scream echoed through the air. Naruto sighed, a sound of weary annoyance. He turned from me and walked to the window. It seems some people are tired of whispering, he said. He glanced back at me, at my shaken form and my trembling sword. Stay here and question your convictions, little paladin. I have some trash to take out. He opened the window, and with a casual grace that defied gravity, he leapt out, landing silently on the grass 3 stories below before breaking into a run towards the source of the explosions. I could only stare after him, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion, the weight of Durandal feeling heavier in my hand than it ever had before. My God was silent, but this boy, he spoke, and his words shook the very foundations of my world. Just as this thought crossed my mind, the sky outside darkened as if a storm had gathered in an instant. A massive, purple barrier, shimmering with immense demonic power, snapped into place, encasing the entire school grounds in a dome of violet light. A new figure descended from the sky, a man with 10 black wings, a wild look in his eyes, and a manic grin on his face. He hovered in the air, his power washing over the school in waves of malice and bloodlust. Hear me, inhabitants of this quiet little town. His voice boomed, amplified by magic. I am Kokabiel, a leader of the fallen angels, and I have grown bored of this pathetic peace. His mad gaze swept the grounds until it locked onto the running form of Naruto. They say a new god has come to play, Kokabiel roared with laughter. A being of judgment. Well, I have a scenario for you. I will restart the Great War right here, on this very spot. I will bring forth the beautiful, glorious chaos of battle. He pointed a finger directly at Naruto. Come and judge this. Judge the magnificent destruction I will wreak upon this world. Show me if your order is anything more than a fleeting dream. Show me your power, silent judge. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The Stillness Before the Storm. The world outside the clubhouse window warped. Kokabiel's declaration echoed across the school grounds, a pronouncement of doom that sent waves of panic through the student body. The sky, once a peaceful twilight blue, was now a sickly, swirling purple, sealed by the dome of demonic energy. Screams erupted from the main school building as students, moments ago worried about exams and after-school clubs, were suddenly faced with a 10-winged monster promising to bring war to their doorstep. Everyone, move! I roared, my mind snapping into command mode. The shock from Xenovia's confrontation and Naruto's leap was instantly replaced by the cold focus of a king responsible for her territory. Sona, we need to coordinate evacuation and defense. A magical communication circle flared to life beside me, Sona Citri's stern, focused face appearing in it. Already on it, Rias, she said, her voice crisp and free of panic. Behind her, I could see the student council members mobilizing. My peerage is securing the main building and guiding the humans to the gymnasium. It's the most fortified structure. We'll erect a secondary defensive barrier around it. We can't let Kokabiel's forces reach them. Understood, I said. My family will meet the first wave. We'll hold the line. The circle vanished. I turned to my peerage. Their faces were grim, but their eyes held a fiery resolve. The fear was there, but it was overshadowed by their duty. Kiba, you have the front lines. Your speed is our first defense. Yuto nodded sharply, sword birth already active as demonic swords erupted from the ground at his feet. Akano, air support. Use your lightning to control the battlefield. Keep them disorganized. Akino's smile was a terrifying, predatory thing now, arcs of holy lightning crackling between her fingers. Kaneko, you are our unbreakable wall. Protect Issei and the support members. Kaneko gave a curt nod, her small frame radiating immense power. And me, bucko? Issei asked, his knuckles white as he activated his boosted gear. The red gauntlet materialized on his arm with a familiar green glow. Boost. The sound, usually reassuring, felt small in the face of the overwhelming power radiating from Kokabiel. "You are our cannon, Issei," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Find an opening, charge up your power, and wait for my signal. One powerful shot is worth more than a dozen weak ones." He nodded, his expression determined. He was scared, out of his depth, but he would not break. He was my pawn, and I was proud of him. "Let's go." We burst from the clubhouse, the scene before us a vision of chaos. The manic laughter of Kokabiel echoed from above. On the ground, the earth itself seemed to curdle and boil. From shimmering black pits that opened in the pristine lawns, monstrous creatures began to crawl forth. They were massive, three-headed dogs, each the size of a car, with mangy black fur, glowing red eyes, and saliva that sizzled as it hit the grass. Cerberus hounds. Dozens of them. Alongside them, several fallen angels with 2 or 4 wings descended, brandishing spears of pure, corrupt light. From the other side of the campus, I saw Sona's peerage engage another group, their tactical precision on full display as they fought to protect the fleeing students. "For the glory of Lord Kokabiel," one of the fallen shrieked, diving towards us. "Not on my watch," Yuto snarled. He blurred, a streak of silver in the dying light. The sound of steel meeting steel rang out as he engaged the fallen. Kiba was a master swordsman, but he was one against many, and these were battle-hardened rogue angels. A Kano ascended into the air, a tempest of holy lightning and demonic power. Golden bolts rained down, incinerating a Cerberus hound and forcing several fallen to scatter. But for every one she struck down, 2 more took its place. "Rias!" A voice called out. I turned to see Zenobia and Irina running towards us, their faces pale but resolute. Zenovia's durandal was bared, humming with holy light, and Irina had summoned a shimmering ring of light, her own angelic power. "The enemy of my god is my enemy," Zenobia stated, her eyes fixed on Kokabiel, who was watching the chaos below with the glee of a child burning ants. "His desire for war is a blasphemy against the peace Father wished for. We will fight with you." I didn't have time to argue or process the theological whiplash of the situation. "Fine," I said. "We need all the help we can get. Take the right flank." Zenobia didn't need to be told twice. With a battle cry, she charged, durandal swinging in a wide, brilliant arc that cleaved a Cerberus in 2. The sheer destructive power of her holy sword was breathtaking. Irina provided support, her rings of light binding the limbs of fallen angels, creating openings for Zenovia's devastating attacks. We fought. We fought with everything we had. Demonic energy, holy lightning, sacred swords, and draconic power filled the air. But it was like trying to hold back the tide with a bucket. For every monster we destroyed, 3 more clawed their way from the ground. Kokabiel's forces were endless, and his own power hung over us like a guillotine, waiting to fall. Saji, Sona's pawn, was spewing dragonfire from his absorption line, but a fallen angel scored a deep cut across his back, sending him to one knee. Kiba was being forced back, his demonic swords shattering against the coordinated attacks of 3 fallen at once. "Bucko!" Issei yelled. His gauntlet was glowing intensely. "Boost! Boost! 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 Boost!" "Not yet, Issei," I shouted, unleashing a blast of my own power of destruction. The crimson-black energy, a legacy of the Bael clan, vaporized a pack of hellhounds, but it was draining me faster than I could recover. We were losing. Slowly, inexorably, we were being pushed back and ground down. Kokabiel had not even moved from his spot in the sky, and we were already at our limit. The sheer despair of the situation was a cold weight in my chest. It was then that he decided to play. "You're more durable than I thought, little devils," Kokabiel's voice boomed. He lazily pointed a finger down, not at me, but at Zenobia. "But that sword is an eyesore. Let's remove it." A spear of condensed light, 10 times larger and more powerful than any his subordinates had used, formed at his fingertip. It blazed with a white-hot intensity that made the air scream. Zenobia, locked in combat with a hulking beast, looked up, her eyes widening in horror. She couldn't dodge in time. Durandal, for all its power, could not block an attack of that magnitude. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the spear leave Kokabiel's hand. I saw the look of grim acceptance on Zenovia's face. I saw Irina scream her name. And then I saw a blur of motion. Naruto, who had been a distant figure running across the campus, was suddenly there. He appeared in front of Xenovia in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He hadn't run. He had simply arrived. He stood with his back to her, facing the oncoming spear of light, his hands still in his pockets. He looked up at the incandescent projectile, sighed a theatrical, bored sigh, and then lifted his right hand. He didn't summon a shield. He didn't prepare a counterattack, he simply made a fist. And punched it. He punched the spear of pure holy energy, an attack powerful enough to level the entire school. There was no earth-shattering explosion. There was only a sound, a sharp tink, like a pebble striking a pane of glass. The spear of light shattered. It didn't explode outwards. It imploded, collapsing in on itself and dissolving into a million harmless, glittering motes that rained down around them like a shower of diamonds. Silence. Absolute, profound silence fell over the entire battlefield. Friend and foe alike stopped fighting, their eyes wide with disbelief. Kokabiel's manic grin faltered, his jaw hanging slightly agape. Naruto lowered his fist, flexing his fingers as if he'd just done something strenuous, like opening a stubborn jar. He glanced over his shoulder at the stunned Xenovia. "You really need to work on your situational awareness, little paladin," he said, his voice calm. He then turned his full attention to the sky, his blue eyes locking onto the 10-winged fallen angel. "And you," he called out, his voice carrying effortlessly across the grounds. "You're the one making all this noise. Don't you have anything better to do? A hobby? Perhaps you could take up knitting." Kokabiel's shock quickly morphed back into rage, mixed with a newfound excitement. "So, the anomaly shows its fangs. Good. Good. This is what I was waiting for." He raised both his hands, and a dozen more light spears, each as powerful as the first, materialized around him. "Let's see you punch all of these, silent judge." The spears rained down, a storm of celestial annihilation aimed at the single, stationary figure on the ground. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised his head, and the ground around him answered his silent command. The manicured lawns, the rich soil, the very dirt of the earth itself turned to golden sand. It swirled up around him, not like a whirlwind, but like a rising tide. It formed a massive, perfect dome that covered him completely. The spears of light struck the dome, and instead of exploding, they simply sank into it, their light extinguished as if they were being swallowed by the desert itself. The dome of sand subsided, sinking back into the earth as if it had never been there, leaving the grass pristine and untouched. Naruto stood in the same spot, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "Is that really it?" he asked, his voice laced with boredom. "Spears of light. How unoriginal. You talk of beautiful chaos, but your methods are so painfully dull." He gestured at the remaining Cerberus hounds, which had begun to growl and advance again. "And these things? They're an affront to good dog breeding." He stamped his foot. Just once. A wave of golden sand erupted from the ground, spreading out across the battlefield in a rushing, silent tsunami. It didn't harm any of the students from Kuo or the allied fighters. It flowed around them like water around stones. But when the sand touched the Cerberus hounds, they were instantly encased. The sand clung to them, hardening into sandstone statues in the middle of their snarls. Then, with a collective groan, the statues cracked, crumbled, and disintegrated into nothing more than piles of dust, swept away by the evening breeze. In less than 5 seconds, every single one of Kokabiel's monstrous foot soldiers had been utterly and completely erased. The remaining fallen angels stared in horror at their vanished beasts, then at Naruto. Their nerve broke. With cries of terror, they turned and fled, flying desperately towards the edge of the barrier, only to slam into it and fall to the ground. "No one is leaving," Naruto stated calmly. "The performance isn't over yet." He looked back up at Kokabiel, whose face was now a mask of disbelief and fury. "So, it's just you and me. Are you going to show me this beautiful chaos, or are you just going to keep throwing shiny things at me until my patience runs out? You dare mock me?" Kokabiel roared, his power flaring to its absolute peak. The air itself began to vibrate. "I am a war prince of the Grigori. I survived the Great War. I will show you power that will make you grovel." "You survived because you ran," Naruto corrected him, his voice cutting through Kokabiel's bluster like a shard of ice. "You saw the true monsters on the battlefield, God. The original Satans, and you fled. You've spent the centuries since then preying on the weak, dreaming of a war you don't have the courage to actually fight. You don't love chaos. You love the idea of it, because it makes you feel powerful. But true chaos, you wouldn't recognize it if it consumed you. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the core of Kokabiel's pride, his history, his very identity. I'll kill you, Kokabiel shrieked, finally losing the last of his composure. He descended from the sky like a meteor, his body wreathed in darkness and light, a being of pure, destructive rage. Naruto watched him come. He didn't brace himself, he didn't power up, he just stood there, a beacon of absolute calm in the heart of a raging storm. Your problem, Kokabiel, Naruto said, his voice so quiet, yet I could hear it perfectly from where I stood 100 yards away, is that you are too loud. As Kokabiel came within reach, ready to unleash his final, cataclysmic attack, Naruto lifted his hand. He didn't aim for Kokabiel's body, he aimed for his mouth. He placed his index finger gently on Kokabiel's lips. Shish. And all sound ceased. Kokabiel's war cry died in his throat. The hum of the barrier vanished. The wind stopped blowing. A profound, tomb-like silence fell over the world. Kokabiel's eyes widened in sheer terror. He was still moving, still filled with power, but he was trapped in an envelope of absolute silence. He was a being who reveled in the screams of battle, and he had been sentenced to a world without sound. You crave chaos, Naruto's voice echoed, not through the air, but directly inside everyone's mind. It was a cold, dispassionate, judging tone. You yearn for the noise of battle. For screams and explosions. You define yourself by the noise you create. Naruto's eyes began to glow with that terrifying, ancient gold. Your sentence is silence. Your tomb is stillness. He pushed his finger slightly, and Kokabiel was thrown backwards. As he flew through the air, the ground beneath him began to churn. It wasn't sand this time. The earth itself ripped open, and from the chasm rose a structure of impossible geometry. It was a pyramid, vast and imposing, its base easily covering half the school's athletic field. It was built of shimmering black obsidian, laced with veins of glowing, golden sand that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart. A gate of pure golden energy opened at the pyramid's base, and the silenced, terrified form of Kokabiel was pulled inside by an unseen force. He didn't struggle. He couldn't. His power, his rage, his very being was nullified by the absolute order of his prison. The gate sealed shut with a soft, final thump that was felt more than heard. The pyramid stood there, a silent, black monument on the school grounds, radiating an aura of immense age and perfect, eternal stillness. The purple barrier in the sky flickered and shattered like glass, returning the sky to its normal, starry state. The war was over. Azazel's POV. I lowered my binoculars, my hands trembling slightly. My laboratory, my notes, my theories, all of it felt like children's toys now. The casual, academic glee I had felt earlier had been scoured away, replaced by a cold, hard knot of professional dread. I had watched the entire battle on my long-range scanners, analyzing every scrap of energy, and what I had seen defied every law of modern thaumaturgy. The boy no, the entity hadn't used demonic power, he hadn't used holy energy, he hadn't used a sacred gear. The power he wielded was something else. It was terrestrial, yes, but also, chthonic. Underworldly. Not the underworld of Rias Gremory and Searsex, which was just another dimension. This was the underworld of myth, of primal, planetary consciousness. The sand. It wasn't just enchanted sand, it was a piece of duat. The Egyptian underworld. A realm long thought to be sealed off, inaccessible since the decline of that pantheon. And the pyramid, that was not just a prison of rock and magic. It was a pocket dimension. A self-contained universe of absolute law and silence. He hadn't just defeated Kokabiel. He had created a personalized hell for him and banished him there for eternity. This was not the power of a human, or a devil, or an angel. This was the power of a god. But not one of the gods we knew. Not one from the Norse, Greek, or Hindu systems. This was the power of the oldest pantheon, the one that had laid down some of the first rules before the God of the Bible had risen to prominence. He was an arbiter. A judge from a system of laws so ancient they predated the Great War itself. Kokabiel, in his arrogant stupidity, had challenged a fundamental constant of the universe and had been removed from the equation for his trouble. This Naruto Uzumaki didn't fight. He corrected. He balanced. He erased errors. I turned from my observation post. Shemazai was staring at me, his face ashen. "Governor, what was that?" "That," I said, my voice grim, "was a paradigm shift. The game hasn't just changed, Shem. We've been kicked off the board and a much, much older one has been slammed down on the table. I had to go to Kuo. Not as an enemy. Not even as a curious observer anymore. I had to go as a diplomat. I had to go and speak to this being before he decided that the entire fallen angel faction was an error that needed to be corrected." Back on the school grounds, a collective, shuddering breath was released. It was over. The peerages of Gremory and Citri, the two church exorcists, all stood panting, battered, and bruised, staring at the impossible black pyramid that now dominated the landscape. Then, they looked at Naruto. He stood before the monument, his hands back in his pockets, his golden glow fading. He looked like he had just finished a mildly strenuous chore, like taking out the garbage. He turned to face us, a small smile on his face. "See? All quiet now." But as he took a step, he faltered. He grunted, a sharp intake of breath, and gripped the side of his head. His calm facade shattered, replaced by a rictus of genuine pain. His legs buckled, and he dropped to one knee. "Naruto-kun!" I cried out, rushing forward, my own exhaustion forgotten. He held up a hand to stop me, his eyes squeezed shut. A low groan escaped his lips. It was the first sound of weakness, of vulnerability, any of us had ever heard from him. And in the silence of his mind, a voice spoke. It was a voice of shifting sands and dry, ancient tombs, a voice of cold authority that was utterly alien to him, and yet horrifyingly familiar. "You have awakened, Judge, but you have forgotten the laws." The voice was layered, ancient, and filled with a cold, bureaucratic anger. "To pass a verdict of eternal sealing is the right of the Pantheon. You have not sought the counsel of Anubis. You have not balanced the scales in the Hall of Two Truths. You have acted unilaterally, and your actions have disturbed the stillness of the duet. The balance is broken." Naruto gritted his teeth, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. Who was Anubis? What was the Pantheon? The words were foreign, but they resonated in the deepest parts of his soul with a terrifying sense of forgotten duty. The voice delivered its final, chilling message. "You have cast a verdict without the consent of the Pantheon. There will be a reckoning. The old ways must be honored. We are watching." The presence receded, leaving only a throbbing headache and a cold, terrifying certainty. He wasn't just a powerful being in a world of devils and angels. He was a runaway piece of a much older, much stricter system. And he had just gotten a summons from the gods he had forgotten he served. He looked up, his blue eyes clouded with pain and confusion, and saw Rias and the others staring down at him with expressions of pure shock and concern. For the first time since he had arrived in Kuo, the silent judge felt a tremor of fear. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Echoes in a Sealed Tomb. The silence that followed the psychic echo was, in its own way, more terrifying than the battle that had preceded it. One moment, Naruto was the absolute arbiter of reality, a being of unshakable calm and power. The next, he was on one knee, gasping, a sheen of sweat on his brow, his face contorted in a mask of pure agony. The invincible facade had not just cracked, it had been shattered. "Naruto-kun." My cry was a raw, instinctual thing, tearing from my throat. Exhaustion, aches. The strain of battle, all of it vanished, consumed by a wave of cold, adrenaline-fueled fear. I was at his side in an instant, my hands hovering over his shoulders, unsure if touching him would help or harm. The rest of my peerage, along with Sona's and the two exorcists, surged forward, forming a protective, bewildered circle around him. "What's wrong with him?" Issei stammered, his boosted gear dematerializing as the immediate danger passed. "Did Kokabiel do something to him before, you know?" "No," Xenovia said, her voice hushed, her eyes wide with a look that was no longer just doubt, but profound awe. She stared at Naruto not as a heretic, but as one might stare at a martyr. This was not from the fallen angel. This was from within, or from above. Naruto pushed himself up, waving off my offered support, though I saw him tremble. He took a few deep, ragged breaths, his eyes still squeezed shut. When he finally opened them, the ancient golden glow was gone, leaving only his deep blue eyes, now clouded with a confusion and pain that was startlingly human. "I'm fine," he grunted, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. He forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Akeno was instantly at his other side, her usual teasing smile replaced by a mask of genuine, deep concern. She placed a steadying hand on his arm. Era, you don't look fine," she murmured, her voice soft and stripped of its usual artifice. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Naruto muttered, his gaze distant as he stared at the impossible black pyramid that now dominated the skyline. It stood there, silent and perfect, a monument to his power and, he now suspected, his folly. Just a headache. No one believed him. We had just witnessed him punch a spear of holy light, inhale hellfire, and seal a Cadre-class fallen angel into a pocket dimension. The idea that a simple headache could bring him to his knees was laughable. This was something else. Something that could touch the untouchable. Back to the clubroom. "Now," I ordered, leaving no room for argument. "Sona, can you and your team handle the cleanup and this?" I gestured vaguely at the colossal pyramid. Sona nodded, her face grim as she assessed the situation. "We'll manage. The priority is containing the information leak. I'll have to place the entire school under a 24-hour cognitive dissonance field. We'll craft a story about a surprise geological event combined with a guerrilla art installation. It's flimsy, but it will have to do until the higher-ups in the underworld decide how to handle this permanent addition to my school's campus." She gave the pyramid a deeply resentful glare. With the situation managed, Akeno and I practically herded Naruto back towards the old school building, my peerage forming a tight, anxious guard around us. Every step seemed to be an effort for him. The confident, unshakable pillar of strength had been replaced by someone wounded and uncertain. It was terrifying, but it also sparked a fierce, protective instinct in my heart that was entirely new. He had saved me. Now, it was my turn to offer him sanctuary. We sat in the occult research club room, the same room that had hosted his judgment of Riser Phoenix. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. It was quiet, somber, and thick with unspoken questions. I had sent the others away to rest, save for Akeno, who refused to leave my side. She prepared a special herbal tea known for its calming properties while I sat opposite Naruto on the velvet couch. He stared into the middle distance, his brow furrowed, slowly turning a small, intricately carved scarab beetle made of hardened sand over and over in his hand. He had manifested it unconsciously, a nervous tic. "They are not happy with me," he said finally, his voice low. "They?" I asked gently. "The voice you heard?" He nodded, not looking at me. "The powers I originate from. I suppose you could call them my pantheon." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "It seems I have a pantheon. And they have rules. Rules I've apparently forgotten." "What did they say?" Akeno asked, setting a steaming cup of tea before him. She sat beside me, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp and focused on him. Naruto finally met our gaze. The confusion was still there, but it was coalescing into a grim understanding. "They called me Judge. They said I acted without the consent of the Pantheon. That I passed a verdict of eternal sealing, a right reserved for them. They mentioned a name. Anubis." Akeno and I exchanged a sharp glance. Anubis. The ancient Egyptian god of the dead and embalming. A deity from a pantheon long considered dormant, isolationist, and almost entirely withdrawn from the affairs of the modern supernatural world. "They said I broke the balance of the duat their underworld," Naruto continued, his voice heavy with a frustration that seemed ancient, "and that there would be a reckoning." The full weight of the situation crashed down on me. We were not just dealing with the political fallout among the three factions. Naruto's actions had stirred something far older, a sleeping giant from the dawn of mythology. He hadn't just angered devils and angels, he had violated the sacred laws of his own kind. "Naruto," I said, leaning forward, "you are not alone in this. You saved me. You saved my family. The House of Gremory is in your debt. My brother, Sirzex, will be made aware. We will face this with you." He looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had been a solitary force for so long, the idea of a true alliance seemed foreign to him. "Rias." "She's right," Akeno added, her voice soft but firm. "We are all monsters of one kind or another here, Naruto-kun. We all have a heritage that seeks to define or control us." Her eyes held a deep, knowing sadness. You are not the only one haunted by your own blood. We do not run from the storm. We fly into it, together. A genuine, small smile touched Naruto's lips. It didn't reach his eyes, but it was a start. The gratitude in his expression was a tangible thing. Thank you, he said, the words simple but carrying immense weight. He finally took a sip of the tea, and a fraction of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. For now, in this room, surrounded by those he had protected, he had found a small island of peace in a rapidly rising sea of conflict. The next day, Kuo town was a mess. News helicopters buzzed in the sky like angry hornets, kept at a distance by atmospheric interference Sona's peerage had hastily erected. The official story was a masterclass in bureaucratic obfuscation. A localized, overnight volcanic extrusion had created the Kuo Pyramid, which was immediately declared a national treasure and a site of immense geological importance. A notoriously eccentric and reclusive artist simultaneously claimed responsibility, calling it his magnum opus on the permanence of silence. The stories contradicted each other so perfectly that the public was left more confused than suspicious, and the area around the school was cordoned off by government agents, humans who were secretly in the devil's employ. Naruto stood on the roof of the old school building, looking down at the controlled chaos and the silent, black monolith that had caused it. It was a stark, physical reminder of his power and his ignorance. A monument to a crime he hadn't known he was committing. Quite the conversation starter, isn't it? The voice was relaxed, amused, and belonged to someone who had appeared behind him without making a sound. Naruto didn't turn. He had sensed the approach. This energy was familiar from the battle, one of the observers. Azazel, Naruto stated, his tone flat. The governor of the fallen angels strolled up to stand beside him at the railing, dressed not in armor, but in a casual V-neck shirt and jeans. He looked more like a laid-back college professor than a leader of a celestial faction. In the flesh, Azazel said cheerfully, leaning on the railing. I have to say, kid, that was the most impressive display of unsanctioned metaphysical restructuring I've seen in my entire, very long life. A pocket dimension keyed to sensory deprivation? Genius. Utterly terrifying, but genius. What do you want? Naruto asked, his eyes still fixed on the pyramid. Answers. And to offer a warning, Azazel said, his tone shifting from jovial to serious. First, the warning. You've kicked a hornet's nest the size of a dimension. The Egyptian pantheon doesn't play well with others. They're old, they're stuffy, and they are obsessed with rules, balance, and cosmic bureaucracy. Anubis, in particular, is the ultimate stickler for proper procedure. You basically performed a capital punishment without filing the right paperwork in his jurisdiction. They take that sort of thing very, very personally. This confirmed Naruto's fears. The threat was real, and it was knowledgeable. You seem to know a lot about them. It's my hobby, Azazel shrugged. I collect and study sacred gears, but my real passion is forgotten mythologies and magical systems. The Egyptian system is one of the oldest. It's based on the concept of Ma'at order, truth, justice. Your power, I suspect, is derived from it. You're not just a powerhouse, kid. You're a walking, talking piece of fundamental cosmic law. He looked at Naruto with an expression of pure, unadulterated academic fascination. Which brings me to my request for answers. What are you? A reincarnation? A rogue aspect of a god? A new entity born from old power? The possibilities are endlessly fascinating. I don't know, Naruto admitted, the words tasting like ash. I have fragmented memories. Instincts. The name, Judge, feels right, but the rest is a blank slate I'm only now realizing exists. Azazel nodded, seemingly satisfied with this. Amnesia. Classic. Makes it even more interesting. Well, consider this a professional courtesy. The gods of the Nile are coming for you. Or, more likely, for your pyramid. They'll see it as stolen property. They won't send Anubis himself, not at first. They'll send a collector. An enforcer. Be ready for it. He pushed himself off the railing. One last piece of advice. Your power comes from order. Find their rules. Learn them. Use them. That's the only way you'll survive a war with your own side. With a final, two-fingered salute, Azazel vanished in a swirl of black feathers, leaving Naruto alone with the heavy weight of his new reality. That evening, Naruto found himself drawn back to the pyramid. The area was deserted, sealed off from the world. Under the light of the moon, The obsidian structure seemed to drink the light, its presence a profound silence that dwarfed all other sound. It's beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. He turned to see Akeno approaching, her long black hair shimmering in the moonlight. She had shed her school uniform for a simple, elegant dress. Her usual playful smile was absent, replaced by a softer, more somber expression. "It's a mistake," Naruto said, his voice quiet. "Is it?" She countered, coming to a stop beside him. "You saved everyone. You stopped a war before it began. How can that be a mistake?" "I broke the laws of my own nature. I've endangered everyone by bringing this attention down on us, on Rias, on you." Akeno was silent for a long moment. "When I was a little girl," she began, her voice a near whisper, "my mother was killed by her own kind for falling in love with a fallen angel. I was hunted. I was alone. I was terrified of the blood in my veins, of the black wings that could sprout from my back. I thought I was a monster that deserved to be punished." She looked up at him, her violet eyes glistening. "Rias saved me. She told me my power was a part of me, and that she would never abandon me for it. She gave me a home." She took a step closer, her hand gently finding his. Her skin was warm. "You and I are not so different, Naruto-kun. We both wield powers that frighten people. We both carry a heritage that comes with a heavy price. You are not a mistake. You are magnificent. And you are not alone." The sincerity in her voice was a balm on his frayed soul. The fear, the confusion, the crushing weight of a forgotten duty, it all seemed to lessen under her gaze. He saw past the seductive priestess of thunder to the lonely girl who understood what it meant to be feared for what you are. Before he could respond, she rose on her tiptoes, her free hand coming up to gently cup his cheek. "So let me share the burden," she whispered, her lips inches from his. And then she kissed him. It wasn't like her usual teasing advances. There was no artifice, no game. It was a kiss of profound emotional honesty. It was fiery and passionate, yet tender and deeply comforting. It was a kiss of shared darkness and defiant strength, an acknowledgement of the monsters within them both. His mind, usually a fortress of calm analysis, went blessedly blank. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer, and returned the kiss with a fervor that surprised them both. It was a desperate, grounding anchor in a sea of cosmic uncertainty. When they finally broke apart, breathless, they simply held each other, the silent pyramid bearing witness. But their moment of peace was destined to be short-lived. A sudden drop in temperature made the air crystallize. A shadow detached itself from the base of the pyramid, coalescing into a figure that seemed woven from moonlight and grave dust. It was tall and slender, wrapped head to toe in pristine white mummy linens, leaving not a single patch of skin exposed. It held two wicked, curved khopesh swords that shimmered with an ethereal, sickly green light. Its presence felt like Naruto's own, ancient, orderly, and utterly devoid of life but twisted, hollowed out. It was a divine enforcer. An echo made flesh. By the authority of the Pantheon and the decree of Anubis, the keeper of the scales, a dry, rasping voice spoke, not from a mouth, but from all around them, like the rustling of papyrus. "I am a Sahama, a collector of unsanctioned tombs. This structure is an illegal vessel of judgment, created in violation of celestial law." The creature, the Sahama, turned its head towards Naruto, its unseen eyes pinning him in place. "Judge. You will surrender this tomb for reclamation, or you will be audited for non-compliance." Akeno immediately stepped back, lightning crackling around her fists. "Naruto-kun, what is that?" "It's a repo man," Naruto said, his voice grim as he gently pushed Akeno behind him. A fight was coming. But Azazel's words echoed in his mind. Find their rules. Learn them. Use them. He couldn't just punch this thing. This was a battle of jurisdiction. "I am the judge who sealed it," Naruto declared, his voice taking on the resonant authority he had used against Riser. "This tomb falls under my authority." "Your authority is suspended pending review," the Sahama rasped. It raised its cursed blades. "The property will be repossessed." The collector lunged. It didn't run. It glided over the ground, phasing through a bench in its path. Its swords were not aimed at Naruto's body, but at his soul. Issei Hyodo's POV. "We felt the power spike from the clubhouse and arrived just in time to see the mummy thing attack Naruto. My first instinct was to scream, boost, and charge in. But I couldn't. My body was frozen. my legs wouldn't obey. It wasn't just fear. It was a fundamental sense of non-existence. This fight was happening on a level one couldn't even begin to comprehend. Kokabiel was a monster, sure. He threw around power. I understood power. I could boost my own and punch back. But this was different. Partner, be still, Diedrag's voice whispered in my mind. It was the first time I had ever heard the mighty Welsh dragon sound, small. Afraid. That being, and the boy, their power is not of this world. It is not of any world I know. It is the power of rules. Of law itself. It is older than the breath of God. Older than me. To interfere would be like a single word trying to argue with the entire concept of language. We cannot fight this. Diedrag was scared. The being who boasted of killing gods was scared. I watched as Naruto met the creature's attack. He didn't use sand. He didn't throw a punch. He raised his hand, and golden, glowing hieroglyphs like something out of a history book materialized in the air, forming a barrier. The mummy's soul swords struck the barrier, and a horrible screeching sound, like tearing reality, filled the air. This wasn't a fight of strength. It was like watching two lawyers argue by throwing glowing, deadly court documents at each other. I was completely, utterly useless. Naruto was forced back, the Sahama's assault relentless. The creature was an extension of the Pantheon's will. Its authority temporarily greater than his suspended one. He was fighting a battle of bureaucracy with soul-slashing swords. Find the rules. Use the rules, Azazel had said. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing, diving into the sea of fragmented memories. He needed a different kind of law. Not one of sentence and punishment, but one of ownership and reclamation. As the Sahama phased through his barrier for another strike, Naruto's eyes widened. He had it. A law so ancient, so foundational, it superseded the Pantheon's own collection rights. I invoke the law of consecration. Naruto boomed, his voice resonating with a new, deeper authority. The hieroglyphs around him changed, shifting from symbols of judgment to symbols of creation and sanctification. This tomb was not merely built. It was consecrated with the name of its prisoner. It is not a vessel. It is a dedicated sarcophagus, bound to its occupant for eternity. The Sahama froze mid-strike, its body twitching. Consecration requires a sacrifice. A tribute of life essence to seal the bond. It was given one. Naruto countered, pointing at the pyramid. The life essence of every creature slain by Kokabiel across his entire existence. Their lingering spirits. Their final moments. I used them as the mortar. Their collective will demand a justice, and I used it to consecrate his prison. This tomb is not my property, nor is it the Pantheon's. It belongs to his victims. The Sahama began to shudder violently. Naruto had invoked a law that even Anubis had to honor the rights of the dead. He had turned the argument from one of property law to one of sacred rights. This is irregular, the collector rasped, its form flickering. A report must be filed. File it, Naruto said, his voice cold. He took a step forward, his authority now absolute. Now leave my territory. Your audit is complete. With a final, frustrated hiss, the Sahama dissolved into dust and shadow, flowing back into the base of the pyramid and vanishing. The cold left the air. The battle was over. Naruto stood panting, the strain of the mental and magical battle leaving him drained. He had won, but it was a narrow victory, one with a loophole. He looked at the silent pyramid, his mind clear. Azazel was right. As long as this thing stood here, they would keep coming. They'd send more collectors, more enforcers, each armed with a different set of laws he'd have to fight. Its very existence was a challenge to them, a beacon drawing their relentless, bureaucratic wrath directly to Kuo. Directly to Rias, and Akano, and everyone he had just sworn to protect. He was faced with an impossible choice. He could keep the tomb here, a constant monument to his power, and face an endless war with the gods of his own forgotten pantheon, endangering everyone he cared about. Or, he could destroy it. Destroy the prison, shatter the sarcophagus, and in doing so, release Kokabiel unharmed, unsealed, and absolutely furious back into the world. He would have to choose between the chaos of one mad god, or the cold, orderly wrath of many. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The weight of a pharaoh's choice. The silence left by the vanquished Sahama was heavier than the one that had followed Kokabiel's defeat. That had been a silence of shock and awe. This was a silence of dawning horror, the quiet contemplation of an impossible choice. The air, no longer chilled by the collector's presence, felt thick with dread. My family, my peerage, stood a respectful distance away, their faces a mixture of relief and deep-seated anxiety as they watched me, waiting. They had heard the ultimatum. They understood the stakes. My eyes were fixed on the Black Pyramid. My creation. My prison. My mistake. It was a beacon. A shining lure in a metaphysical ocean, attracting predators I was only just beginning to remember existed. Predators who operated on rules I had forgotten, wielding authorities that could challenge my own. As long as it stood here, in this world, it was an open wound, inviting infection. Two choices, both poisoned. Destroy the tomb and unleash Kokabiel, a being of immense power and malice, back upon a world that was not prepared for him. It would be a betrayal of the very justice I had enacted. It would be an admission of failure. All the risk, all the effort, would have been for nothing. The mad dog would be let off his leash, free to pursue his war once more. Or, leave the tomb here and fight a war on two fronts. I would have to defend this world from the opportunistic scavengers of the three factions, while simultaneously battling the ancient, implacable bureaucracy of my own pantheon. I would be painting a target on Kuo, on Rias, on everyone who had shown me kindness. They would become collateral damage in a cosmic custody battle. I bowed my head, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, a physical force. For the first time, I felt the crushing burden of the title, Judge. It was not just the power to act, it was the responsibility for the consequences. Naruto-kun. Rias's voice was soft but firm. She stepped forward, her crimson hair a defiant splash of color against the grim backdrop. You do not have to make this choice alone. She is right, Yuto added, his usual calm expression hardened with resolve. We will stand with you, whatever you decide. If the gods of your past wish for war, then we will give them one. Yeah. Issei shouted, summoning his boosted gear with a defiant roar. We're a team. We're the Gremory family. We don't back down. Their loyalty was a tangible thing, a warmth against the cold dread in my soul. But it was that very loyalty that made the choice so unbearable. They were willing to die for me, for a battle that was entirely my fault. They saw an ally to support. I saw lambs I was leading to a slaughter. Akeno came to my side, her touch on my arm gentle. What is the purpose of power? She whispered, her eyes searching mine, if not to protect those you care for? Do not choose the path that makes a mockery of that. Do not undo the good you have done out of fear of what is to come. She was right. Releasing Kokabiel was the coward's path. It was sacrificing justice for the illusion of safety. It was unacceptable. Which left only war. A war one would have to fight, dragging them all with me. Unless, an idea began to form in the deepest recesses of my mind. It was not a memory, but an instinct. A whisper of knowledge from a past life, a truth about the nature of the power I wielded. The power of a judge, an arbiter, was not merely to create or destroy. It was the power to define, to set boundaries, to order and arrange reality itself. I had created a prison. I had consecrated it. It was a self-contained reality, a pocket dimension. Why did it have to be a pocket in this world? A third option. Not a compromise, but a transcendence of the problem. It was an act of such audacious, reality-bending arrogance that it would either work perfectly or shatter my own existence. There would be no middle ground. You are all correct, I said, my voice resonating with a newfound, terrifying certainty. I looked at my friends, my family, and offered them a genuine smile. I will not release the prisoner. And I will not bring war to your doorstep. Rias looked at me, her expression confused. Then what will you do? I'm going to move it, I said simply. Before anyone could ask what I meant, I turned to face the pyramid. I closed my eyes, shutting out the physical world and turning my senses inward, diving deep into the core of my power. I was not just Naruto Uzumaki. I was the silent judge. This world of devils and angels was my temporary home, but my domain was the space between realities, the realm of absolute law. I stretched out my hands towards the colossal black structure. The air began to hum, not with demonic or holy energy, but with the sound of pure, conceptual power. The ground beneath my feet began to glow, not with a magic circle, but with a complex, interlocking pattern of golden hieroglyphs that spread outwards, covering the entire campus. They were symbols of transition, of gateways, of dimensional folding. What is he doing? I heard Zenobia stammer in the distance. He's rewriting the address, Azazel's voice murmured from somewhere nearby. I sensed he had returned, unable to resist watching this unfold. I pulled. I was not pulling with my muscles, but with my will. I was grabbing the metaphysical anchors of the pocket dimension, the points where it was stapled to the fabric of this reality. The pyramid began to shimmer, its solid black form becoming translucent, ethereal. Through its walls, we could all see it, a swirling vortex of silent chaos, and at its heart, the sealed, screaming form of Kokabiel. The strain was immense. It felt like tearing a page out of a book that was infinitely thick. My muscles screamed in protest, my soul ached, but I held firm. The voice of the Pantheon echoed in my mind, a chorus of bureaucratic outrage at this unprecedented violation of spatial law, but I silenced it with a surge of pure, defiant will. My tomb. My rules. With a final, deafening roar that was heard not with the ears but with the soul, the pyramid and the pocket dimension it contained were ripped free from the world. It hovered in the air for a moment, a shimmering, self-contained universe of judgment, disconnected from everything. Now for the final step. I had nowhere to put it, so I would have to create a space. I reached into my own being, into the void of my own soul, and pulled that outwards too. A rift in space opened beside the floating pyramid. It was not a gateway to another world, but a gateway to nothing. A personal subspace, a fold in my own existence, my personal vault. With a final, gentle push of my will, I guided the shimmering pyramid into the rift. It slid inside, and the rift sealed behind it, leaving no trace, no scar, nothing but a faint scent of ozone and ancient sand. It was done. The golden hieroglyphs on the ground faded. The air returned to normal. The space where the 50-story monument had stood was now just an empty, grassy field, the moonlight revealing the slightly flattened ground where it had rested. Kokabiel was still imprisoned. The beacon was gone. The choice had been unmade. I fell to my knees, the world spinning around me. The effort had drained me more than any fight ever could. I had not just moved an object. I had performed surgery on the very fabric of reality. This time, when Rias and Akeno rushed to my side, I did not wave them away. I leaned into their support, my body trembling with exhaustion, a profound sense of relief washing over me. For the first time, I felt truly, completely spent. And for the first time, I was not alone in my weakness. We returned to the clubroom in a state of quiet, reverent shock. The act one had performed was so far beyond their understanding of power that it had reset their scales completely. I was no longer just a powerful being. I was something else, a force of nature they had somehow befriended. After the others had finally been convinced to go home and rest, Rias remained. She stood before me, her arms crossed, her expression a complex mixture of awe, relief, and deep-seated frustration. "You were going to let us fight a war against gods for you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Or you were going to undo everything you accomplished. You didn't even consider that a third option was possible until the last second." "It was a risk," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "Everything we do is a risk," she retorted, her voice rising. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a passion I had not seen before. "I am the king of this peerage, Naruto. My life is one of risk. But we take those risks together. When you stand there and make these impossible choices by yourself, you are not protecting us. You are excluding us. You are treating me like a subject to be shielded, not a partner to stand beside you." She was right. In my desire to protect them from my problems, I had forgotten that they had chosen to make my problems their own. "I am not just some princess you saved," she said, her voice softening as she reached out and took my hand. Her grip was strong, resolute. "I am Rias Gremory. And I am your ally. Your partner, and more." Her cheeks flushed a delicate shade of pink. "Do not shut me out again. Promise me." I looked into her beautiful blue-green eyes, and I saw not just a devil princess, but a true queen. "My queen." I squeezed her hand. "I promise." The relief that washed over her face was a sight to behold. She smiled, a brilliant, genuine smile that lit up her entire being. She leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. She kissed me. It was a kiss full of promise, of shared burdens and shared victories. It was the sealing of a new covenant, not between factions or kingdoms, but between two souls. When she pulled away, the world felt more stable, more real, than it had before. The next day brought two more significant encounters. The first was Zenobia. She found me by the school's running track, where I was trying to feel out the edges of my own depleted energy. She was in her battle attire, but Durandal was sheathed on her back. She came to a stop before me and executed a formal bow. Naruto-sama, she began, her use of the honorific startling me. Just Naruto is fine, Zenobia. She shook her head. No, I have been thinking all night. I have witnessed you pass judgment that was more just than any I have ever seen from the church. I have seen you risk yourself to protect others, even those you barely know. And I have seen you wield a power that is not born of hatred or chaos, but of a fundamental, terrifying order. She looked up, her golden eyes burning with a new, fervent light. My faith in the men who lead the church is broken. But my faith in the idea of a righteous power, of a justice that protects the innocent, is stronger than ever. That is what I see in you. She unsheathed Durandal and knelt, holding the hilt out to me. My sword and my life are yours. Teach me. Teach me what it means to serve a justice that is true. I stared at the legendary sword being offered to me. I had not sought followers, but they were coming to me nonetheless. I gently pushed the sword back towards her. Keep your sword, Zenobia. And your life is your own. But if you wish to walk this path with me, I will not turn you away. Stand up. A partner does not kneel. She rose, a look of fierce, unwavering loyalty on her face. Another bond had been forged, not in a contract, but in shared ideals. The second encounter was far more official. A massive, combined magic circle of the Gremory and Seraphim sigils appeared in the now empty field. From it stepped two beings who radiated an almost incomprehensible amount of power. The first was Seersex Lucifer, his crimson hair and gentle smile belying the apocalyptic power he held in check. The second was the Archangel Michael, his 12 golden wings furled behind him, his presence a beacon of pure, benevolent grace. They had come not with armies, but with respect. Naruto Uzumaki dono, Seersex began with a polite bow. It is an honor to finally meet the man who has done my sister a service I cannot possibly repay. And a being who has averted a war we have all along dreaded, Michael added, his voice calm and melodic. You have our gratitude. I met their gazes. I did what was necessary to protect the quiet of this town. About that, Seersex said, his expression turning serious. Your actions, while beneficial, have shown us that the presence of such a significant power requires a new understanding. The old agreements are no longer sufficient. This was the moment. The negotiation for the future. I have no desire to join your factions or participate in your politics, I stated clearly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Kuo Town is now under my personal protection. It is to be considered absolute neutral territory. No factional conflicts. No recruiting. No battles. Your people may live here, they may attend school here, but they will do so in peace. Any who break that peace will answer to me. It was a bold, absolute declaration. I was claiming a piece of the world for myself. Seersex and Michael exchanged a long look. I could see the calculations running through their minds. To refuse would be to make an enemy of me, a being who could move dimensions on a whim. To accept was to cede territory and acknowledge a new, independent power on the level of their own. It was Seersex who spoke first. To ensure my sister's safety and the stability of the region, the Devil faction agrees to your terms. Michael nodded slowly. Your justice, while foreign, does not seem to be rooted in evil. A sanctuary of peace is in alignment with the will of heaven. We, too, agree. A new covenant had been struck. Kuo Town was now my domain. A neutral ground in a world of endless conflict. POV switch. The duat, the Hall of Two Truths. The realm was a silent, eternal twilight under a sky of swirling indigo and silver, dotted with stars that were not stars, but the souls of the justified dead. Immense structures of black basalt and polished limestone rose towards this sky, their scale meant to humble gods, not men. In the center of the grandest hall, a figure sat on a simple throne of unadorned obsidian. He was tall and slender, with the head of a noble black jackal. His eyes glowed with the cold, silver light of the soul stars. This was Anubis, keeper of the scales, lord of the necropolis, chief bureaucrat of the afterlife. Before him, a massive set of golden scales sat perfectly, unervingly balanced. A lesser spirit, a Ba scribe, materialized before the throne, quivering. My lord Anubis. The unsanctioned tomb, the Kokabiel vessel, It has vanished from the mortal plane. Anubis did not move. His jackal ears twitched slightly. Vanished? His voice was not a boom, but a dry, precise whisper, like sand scouring stone. It did not beget destruction. It was not unsealed. It simply is no longer there. Correct, my lord. The judge, he has moved it. Relocated the entire consecrated dimension into a subspace of his own creation. It is now outside of our jurisdiction. For a long, silent minute, Anubis simply stared at his perfectly balanced scales. The audacity of the act was insulting. The cleverness of it was intriguing. The judge had not broken the law of consecration. He had instead used a loophole in spatial law so profound it was almost elegant. He had not defied the Pantheon's authority, he had sidestepped it entirely. The collectors are insufficient, Anubis whispered to himself. This judge is not merely a rogue element. He is an innovator. Such things cannot be left unchecked. He raised a single, slender finger. Scribe. Cancel the audit warrants. The matter of the tomb is closed. Open a new file. A formal inquest into the fitness and conduct of the entity known as the Silent Judge. He has remembered enough of our laws to bend them. It is time he was reminded of the laws that cannot be bent. The scribe bowed low. And who shall we send to conduct such an inquest, my lord? Anubis looked at his long, clawed fingers. This requires a personal touch. A being of equal standing. Someone who understands both the old ways and the new world. A faint, cold smile touched his muzzle. Prepare a delegation. It is time we paid a visit to the mortal world. It has been far too long. The sun was setting on another day in Kuo town. In the occult research club room, the atmosphere was light, peaceful, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Laughter echoed off the walls. Issei and Zenobia were in a heated, passionate argument about whether a holy sword could theoretically beat a dragon if the dragon was wearing sunglasses. Kiba was patiently trying to explain the flaw in both of their reasonings. Kaneko was curled up on Naruto's lap, fast asleep, purring softly. Akeno sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his. On his other side, Rias was reading a report from her brother, a small, genuine smile on her face. She leaned over and planted a soft kiss on Naruto's cheek. Thank you, she whispered, her voice for his ears only, for giving us this. I looked around at the chaotic, beautiful scene. At this strange, mismatched family I had somehow acquired. The whispers of the Pantheon were a distant echo. The threat of a divine inquest was a problem for another day. In this moment, surrounded by their warmth, their laughter, their acceptance, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing for millennia. The Silent Judge had found a home, and he would protect it against any law, any god, any threat that dared to disturb its quiet. The storm was coming, I knew. But for now, here in the eye of it, there was calm. And it was good. Chapter 6 End.